The Last Cup. Philip, I don't think there was ever a sexier voice than yours. I just love and adore you. It's Miss B. If you can, give me a call in the next couple of days. I've kept this last voicemail from my dear friend, the lovely Miss Beverly, the tea mistress, back when she reached out that early February afternoon in 2018 to tell me she was at the end of her fight with cancer. Our following conversation included an invitation to her life exit celebration, planned at a New Mexico mountaintop resort later that month. My relationship with Beverly formed over countless pots of tea throughout the years, a habit we shared while expressing our most intimate secrets and desires. Regardless of how challenging life seemed to get, a fine black tea softened the edges in those rough spots. I love tea, and quite obsessively so. I adore the extensive ritual, the aroma, and the subtle, superb taste that each variety offers. I'm fascinated by the way we sit up a little bit straighter and pull our shoulders back when we pick up a teacup. I enjoy watching movies that incorporate polite conversations around tea and the mandated civility that tea commands at every setting. Intrinsically, by its very nature, the formal tea creates a dynamization of space around the table, pulling everyone into altered time over a pile of cucumber sandwiches, scones, and clotted cream. I met Beverly Turfloth in 1997 when she opened the Vintage Tea Leaf, a Victorian-styled tea house in Long Beach, California, an oasis in a beach town that was devoid of a proper tea establishment until she arrived. When she introduced herself on my first visit, I felt the energy shift in the room. She possessed an abundance of gravitas and charisma that pulled you into her orbit. Any resistance was undeniably futile. The Village Tea Leaf was on the eastern edge of downtown Long Beach, California. The decor, best described as anti-minimalist, loosely followed Victorian standards. There were the requisite wingback chairs, red wallpapered walls, draped curtains, whistling kettles, and an abundance of glistening teacups everywhere. The Lady Beverly, one of her many self-proclaimed titles, proclaimed, "Friendship and solace could be found by sharing a pot of tea." If your teapot needed more company than a scone, she'd come and sit with you or introduce you to one of her regulars. Her polished, dry humor and brash sensibility was tempered by a sophisticated permutation of Earth Mother elegance and domineering refinement. She often lingered a bit too long at tableside, frequently took a seat with favored customers, and asked too many questions, but no one ever complained. On my first visit, she appeared from the far end of the room dressed in a flowing sundress and bright sneakers, her long brown hair pulled into a simple bun. She led me to a table, sat down with me, and smiled. "Now what can I get you, my dear? My wall of tea has anything you desire," she said in a rather "I'm busy, but will make time for you" proclamation. "Do you have fresh scones?" I asked, always seeking fine baked goods wherever I go. "I have fresh cranberry orange scones, fresh from the oven," she said and clarified. "You will always find fresh scones. Pronounced scones here, but remember, a scone is a stone you find at Starbucks." I was hooked. The tea was perfect, all 200 varieties. I later perused the tables of tea accoutrements for sale. I bought more than I should, starting an endless stream of purchases of teacups and cozies. I had an addiction, and she fast became my new dealer and beloved friend. I stopped by every week over a dozen years getting to know her. We frequently ran into each other while dining about town and celebrated several life milestones together. I introduced my entire family to Beverly in the Tea Leaf. She took great pleasure pampering my mother and grandmother at her famed Christmas tea. My brother Christopher provided sommelier services at her wedding, and my youngest brother Matthew enjoyed a clandestine affair with her the summer that marriage ended. Beverly's allure was captivating to all who knew her. She invited few into her private world, but when the tea-room doors closed, the champagne flowed, creating a treasured sanctuary. In 2013, I planned a cross-country trip with my fiancé Mason and arranged to meet up with Beverly in New Mexico. During our travel across the southern states, I told Mason all about the tea mistress and my final outing with her before she left California. I had invited Beverly to an evening at the Hollywood Bowl in August 2012 for their Pixar concert. It was then that she took my hand and said she'd been diagnosed with terminal throat cancer. She planned to seek holistic therapy in Truth or Consequences, T/C, New Mexico, with no intention to pursue a traditional chemotherapy regimen. She was choosing a stress-free life with a macrobiotic diet, daily mineral spring therapy, and was selling her beloved tea house. In preparation for that evening under the stars, Beverly packed a picnic dinner, a simple 7-course meal for 2. Every course was served on sparkling china, capturing requisite oohs and ahs from neighboring patrons, who humbly asked to sample the seemingly endless Epicurean delights she pulled out of her magic carpet bag. Beverly treated her men like kings. Her attention was focused, heartfelt, and loving. At the end of the meal, she rolled up the china, the plates clanking in the fine linen, and discarded everything in the trash, down to the last teacup and crystal champagne flute. I laughed at the absurdity of disposable fine bone china as it hit the bottom of the metal trash can with a roaring, smashing crunch. A clear slap in the face of sustainability. I resisted my instinct to reach in and save those beautiful shattered pieces. I hadn't seen Beverly after she left Long Beach for New Mexico, where she took a quaint hilltop home, painted it Frida Kahlo blue, and turned it into a piece of desert chic art. When Mason and I arrived, Beverly took us to one of her regular spots to sip champagne while soaking in mineral baths along the glorious Rio Grande while she recounted her Southwest adventures and the current men in her life. After 2 days, it was evident that her move to T/C was precisely where she needed to be. I stayed in touch with Beverly over the next 5 years until that call in early 2018 arrived. The cancer had rebounded with a vengeance, and she was ready to take her leave. After a 7-year battle, she was exhausted and wanted to go out on her own terms. I could tell she was several bottles of bubbly into that evening when she asked if I would join her celebration. I had no idea what to expect beyond the obvious. We'd meet up at a resort in the mountains near Taos, Mexico, called Ojo Caliente. It was known for its cuisine, and she wanted her last meals to be the best in her life. She paused, sipped more champagne, and cried into the phone. I said I'd be there, and immediately made travel arrangements. The wickedly brisk air required a dense amount of morning beverages to manage our lonely drive to New Mexico in late February 2018. What I remember about that solemn drive was the transition eastward of the landscape along Interstate 10. Beyond the obvious signage, the ravishing orange and golden buttes, flat-topped mesas, and massive plateaus proclaim you've arrived. The breathtaking, multicolored mountains turn more orangey red in the approach to Santa Fe, with the deep arroyos cradling much of the highway, and some of the old Route 66 in that land of enchantment. The final climb up the mountain to the resort was serene and picturesque in the starry night a few days before the full moon. At an elevation of 7,000 feet, the 150-year-old Ojo Caliente was still blanketed in snow with steam rising from its mineral springs. The evening light bounced off the snow with a welcoming glimmer. Our room was in the original rustic hotel. We were thrilled to have our own toilet, but the showers were located across the resort next to the hot springs. The beds were sumptuous, and we slipped between the sheets with exhaustion and a bit of anxiety of what the next few days would bring. On Wednesday morning, Mason and I settled in at the resort's artesian restaurant, where the fare came from the resort's own sustainably grown farms. I half expected Beverly to be in a wheelchair or walker. I should have known better. The front doors flung open, and Beverly burst into the room, palms open to the sky, with all the zest and vigor she ever had, or at least she was giving her best effort. Her brunette hair flowed over her shoulders. She tore off her jungle-patterned sunglasses and ran to me. Our embrace was fierce and warm, her tears hardly noticeable. I squeezed a bit too snugly and left her breathless for a moment. She tightened the beautiful salmon-colored scarf around her neck that hid the bandaged tumor. Beverly's other 2 guests, Craig and Brooks joined us as she relayed stories of her month-long cruise to the Caribbean and South America over the fall. Her charm bracelet was chock full of the tennis awards she'd won at one of the resorts. She tried masking her fatigue, resting her hand on my arm, and described the men doting on her during her recent adventure in Rio as she pulled out a few custom tea bags from her purse. The rest of the day we took mineral dips in the various mineral ponds, while Beverly rested in her private villa, sending us occasional texts with pics of her feet up on a footrest and then her legs from her private pool. The four of us talked about how we should approach the following few days. The plans for Thursday evening included our final supper, followed by a private mineral dip party under the full moon. Beverly would then retire to her suite, unwrap her bandages, take a handful of opiates with some choice champagne, and bleed out in restful sleep. The strategy for how to handle Friday morning was vague at best. Dinner on Wednesday was tough for all of us in her private party. She called us her harem, 4 gay men in love with the same woman. The meal was spectacular, proving why she chose this location. Every entree was sublime. We shared more favorite moments of her life and many accomplishments. She was deeply proud of her life before the tea house. In her career as a rehabilitation therapist, she helped individuals overcome disabilities. Though she was proud of her success as the tea mistress, her therapy work was something she didn't want overshadowed by tea and scones. She wanted to be remembered for helping people live well and without pain. Plans for Thursday night were whispered about for a moment, until Beverly's voice cracked when she spoke of her beloved dog Basil and how much she was going to miss him. We quickly focused on the dessert and ended the evening quietly. She adjusted her scarf constantly, ensuring her neck was completely covered. Thursday morning we were all a bit melancholy. I sat on a bench in the communal showers enjoying the spring water. Most guests were there for the health benefits of the mineral pools. The 77-acre resort was known for healing water since 1868, a welcoming spiritual sanctuary. Before dinner, we gathered in Beverly's suite. More champagne, meats, chocolates, cheese, and crackers. She took out pieces of jewelry and presented us each with a final gift and the story behind each item. The specifics are a bit blurry now, but in the moment, the stories were poignant. She explained her desire to give gifts to her closest friends. Every item was tagged. Not only did Beverly have her tea shop, but she also had an adjoining gift shop with very high-end items. Beverly planned the distribution in detail. Inside each designer purse was a clutch with a scarf and a private letter to each person, and so on. Beverly's official memorial was to take place on Cinco de Mayo, back in T.C. 2 months later. That evening at the restaurant, Beverly handed her sunglasses to Mason and said something solemnly about never seeing the sun again, and spoke of all the things she loved in life. She asked us to share the things that we cherished. After dinner, the group proceeded to our final dip in a privately reserved cliffside pool. The full moon generously illuminated the rising steam. Everyone slipped into the pool, quietly creating our sacred space. Beverly spoke of her past work as a biofeedback therapist. We were exhausted and sat with one another, listening to the wildlife in the distance. In one quiet moment, Beverly splashed her fists and cried, "I don't want my work to be forgotten. It was so important. I helped so many people. I don't want to be forgotten." We sat in silence for several minutes, said our farewells, and went back to our rooms. The Friday morning light was gentle and calming. My first thought was Beverly was gone. I was relieved that she was no longer in pain. She felt disfigured, and that was as burdensome as the internal manifestation. Mason and I planned to leave the resort before housekeeping could find her body in the blood-soaked bed, not wanting to be questioned by the police as part of the death party. The potential and unfortunate possibilities were not something we'd prepared for, and there was still no firm plan in place. We met Craig and Brooks for morning tea. said goodbye, and made our way down the mountain, traveling in near silence for hours, only commenting how the highway followed the Rio Grande in an intimate, intertwining dance down the center of the state. We stopped by Beverly's home in T.C. before continuing to California for final photos of her Casa Azul. One of her neighbors walked over and said, "I don't think she's home, but that house, it's one of a kind, isn't it?" I wiped my eyes and agreed. Mason and I stopped in Tucson for a good dinner and a solid night's sleep. The Gypsy Kings were playing I Did It My Way in the restaurant. Midway through the meal, Brooks called. He was at a hotel in Albuquerque after spending the day in the emergency room. He was having tea with Beverly. "Do you want to speak with her?" Brooks asked. I froze. "Just what do you say to the dead?" My first thought was that he completely lost it and was sitting with her corpse in some dark room. Then I heard Beverly asking for the phone. "Hello, Philip." I was silent. She continued. "Guess what? I clotted," she giggled. I didn't know if that was a good thing. What was the correct response? "I'm sorry you're still alive?" "It's so good to hear your voice, Beverly," I mustered. Tell me, how are you feeling?" I struggled to sound solid. She was not well, and would be staying in Albuquerque with Brooks through the following week. All I could say to her was how much I loved her. A few days later, Brooks called again to say that Beverly had indeed succumbed to her cancer. She knew her body well enough to plan for her timely exit, even if the final plans didn't go precisely as planned. After that week, and with a little emotional distance, I reviewed the entire event with more clarity. Beverly had drunk-dialed me that first night when she told me of her exit plans. She didn't expect me to be part of that final farewell, and was surprised when I called to say we were on our way to see her. She even asked if my visit was a planned surprise. However serendipitous the circumstances, I was there. Looking back, I see the connections between life events, fate, happenstance, and those magical links that bind our lives together. People often flow in and out of our lives for a reason, and some make an impact like a meteor that can change our personal trajectory. Beverly was that person for me. My relationship with her filled my life with exquisite moments of infectious joy, and I've learned to treasure each day and look for the beauty it brings. I'm grateful for that final gathering, for being part of her testimony of life, that I held her hand as we said goodbye, and that my beloved tea mistress shared one of her last cups of tea with me.